So welcome. This is really an exploration and a journey and a look at the Impromptu in G-flat major by Franz Schubert. And I just could not bring myself to just lunge into talking about this piece unless I felt that some aspect of Schubert could become present for us all. So partly what we're going to do at first is we're going to listen to something and just have Schubert be present for us. This is a recording by Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau and Gerald Moore. Litanai is the song, and I want to read a little bit of the translation. So partly it's for that, but there's another significant part, which is I would like you to just lightly pay attention to the melody, just what Schubert's doing melodically. Okay, so the translation roughly is, "Rest in peace, all souls, who done with anxious torment and with sweet dreams ended, weary of life, barely born, departed from this world. All souls rest in peace. And those who never smiled at the sun, kept watch on thorns under the moon. God in the pure light I yearn to see face to face one day. All those departed from hence. All souls rest in peace." So we have an audio.
Vollbracht
there really are no words to bring to that. And in a way, I feel that there's this peaceful and restful and meditative quality about the G-flat impromptu in a certain way. But one of the things that from the very onset of learning the piece that was just came out to me was, as you heard, even in a very peaceful, restful, soulful kind of Schubert, you heard the melody begin to move almost immediately. And it's just amazingly beautiful, but it's moving. And we're going to dart around just a little bit at the beginning here because there's just so many important points to capture at the beginning, and then we're going to go deeper into it. So the first thing I want to do is go to the piano and show you that the construct of the beginning of this very beautiful, very restful piece, melodically speaking, is very interesting to us. We haven't had any melodic movement except for the falling third. It's only until really the third measure of the whole piece, and only in the second half of it, does he begin to move. Fascinating. So we have a piece of incredible beauty positioned on one note for an incredible amount of time. Why did he do this? So you'll have to wait till the end of the lecture to know why he really did this. But I thought there was no better way to create some sort of anticipation than to start out with this beautiful song to get us all present to, of course, this amazing world of Schubert, and then immediately to relate it to what's going on here at the beginning of this piece. So I'm going to leave this for a moment. I'm going to go back there. I want to do a little bit of context for the lecture. So an impromptu as a noun is something impromptu, an impromptu speech, a musical composition, a performance, etc. Second definition, a character piece for piano common in the 19th century and having, despite its title, a clear-cut form. Schubert's impromptus are a series of 8 pieces for solo piano composed in 1827. So we know he died in 1828, so it was composed the year before his death. They were published in 2 sets of 4 impromptus each. The first was published in the composer's lifetime as Opus 90, and the second was published posthumously as Opus 142. They are now cataloged in Deutsch numbers 899 and Deutsch 935 respectively. They are considered to be amongst the most important examples of this popular 19th century genre. The impromptus are often considered companion pieces to the 6 moments musicaux, and they are often recorded and published together. It has been said that Schubert was deeply influenced in writing these pieces by the music of Václav Tomasek. The Opus 90 impromptus consist of 4 typical Romantic era pieces, with each with distinct elements. The name impromptu was given by the publisher. Let's talk specifically about the G-flat major impromptu. This impromptu is known as one of the most lyrical pieces in the piano repertoire. It is in the rather unusual key of G-flat major, and though marked andante, its meter is marked double alla breve, 4 halves, which minimizes the bar lines and clearly indicates a not too slow tempo with continuous flow. It is in a conventional triple song form of ABA, where the B section, which begins from bar 25, is in the relative minor of E-flat minor. Its main subject is a classical period of 4/4, which is followed by another slightly more activated classical period of 4+4. Its perfect fluency and balance are maintained also in the more excited B section, in the relative E flat minor, with its wonderful modulations to C flat major. So, you know, when you're in G flat major, it's like you're talking about C flat minor, it's all like, you know, it's like not our usual way of most common way of relating. But there's actually very, very important reason for this. There's a return of the main material, which then goes to a coda. The coda is very unique, and one of the most important factors in this coda is the use of the German sixth chord, the augmented German sixth chord. The general character of the B section is again a distinctive Schubertian mixture of deep sadness and heroic awareness and compliance at its being objectively there as part of the human condition. Though the accompaniment runs smoothly in sextuplets, one should also note that sometimes, with certain rhythmic ambivalence, Schubert hints towards a sort of hemiola. So let's take a look, now going back to the piano, a little bit more deeply into the piece from the more musical and theoretical perspective at first. So I intend to talk just not in tremendous detail about the structure of the piece, but enough to give us a sense of some of the wonder of what's going on here. And then I'd like to talk in the second half of the lecture about how the Taubman approach interfaces with this piece, with its unique musical challenges, and how it helps us overcome some of these very challenging issues in this piece. But let's start musically first. It's very interesting because the beginning, although melodically we're not that active, we're not particularly in anything very complex harmonically either. So you're basically in your home key, going to the sixth chord, going to your 2 chord, to your 5/7, to a half diminish, which is rather beautiful. One alteration of the A natural brings us right back to the home key. So there's nothing terribly unusual here. The bass is interesting because it grounds us in very root position chords, which makes us feel very restful. And this is very significant because at another moment in the piece, he's not going to use root position things, and it actually is the main reason why that section will feel very differently. But the whole opening grounds us in that bass, the G flat, the E flat, the C flat, okay. So now, section 1 makes a move to the minor 2 in measure 10 and moves to the major 4 in measure 12. So I just want to get a sense of how we're moving harmonically through this. So I'm going to start in measure 8, actually. C flat major chord is just amazing, isn't it? And it's really just the 4 chord. But that's how he's moving. So he's moving there. back to the main tonic chord. So we're tonicizing G flat major over and over and over. So it's really, you're very, very grounded in this world of G flat major. Now, we begin to get something very significant in measure 19. So for going from measure 18 to 19, I'd like to make you aware of the bass. That F flat is going to be crucial for what's going on in the coda. So he uses this F flat to move. He's still staying in the area of C flat major, but remember that F flat. It's a foreshadowing. That little chromatic aspect, if we go to measure 24, is what's happening in this last part of the measure that literally brings us completely into the B section. And what's so amazing about Schubert is that he doesn't necessarily set us up for changes with a lot of preparation. He does things sometimes actually with no preparation. But this is a very good example of, with minimal amount of preparation, you're going from, and I'll start in measure 23. Can you imagine in just one note, we're now in a completely different world. So this B section now in E flat minor, you can see he changes a lot of things. Now the melody is moving. So now it's really moving. Watch. Quite a change in the range and the scope suddenly. I just love this thing. It's so amazing. But if that were not enough, look at how he adds the activity in that bass. And all of a sudden, there's an agitation on a whole nother level. So there's so many levels of activity happening in this piece. Of course, we have the melody. We have a kind of grounding bass, but then we have the departure from the grounding bass into a bass that's moving. In between all of it consistently are these sextuplets that are going on and on and on and on. It's just astounding how he's able to create with very similar materials and then variations of these materials, completely different worlds. So take a listen to the bass part this time and see the amount of activity going on here. So I'll go back actually to the same place. Now, he's brought us into this region of C flat major again. And he tonicizes this so much that we actually begin to believe that we are in C flat major. So, as he's now going, he arrived in measure 32. We just arrive on a carpet of C flat major. It's just the most exquisite thing. And then he's tonicizing C flat major. First he's going to the F flat minor chord, back to C flat major. But he does another pass of it. But this time it's C F flat major. Now we get our diminished chords, so we know we're going somewhere. He's thickening the bass. Now, he brings us in and out of this thing through the Neapolitan chord, and the use of the Neapolitan chord is just amazing here. I'm going to go back to measure 45 and play. What makes this an incredibly exquisite moment is that in the moment after the Neapolitan chord, he goes to the E flat minor chord, but he immediately, with no preparation, substitutes the E flat minor chord for the E flat major chord. And it's just something that's just... bass, 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 bringing us to our dominant for the return of the main material. Very significant move happening in measure 70. So in measure 70, what's so amazing, and it's really kind of an interesting look at the voice leading aspect, because it's not actually the best voice leading. In the A section, we're starting in a way to move toward the coda. And what he does, instead of going to the G flat, which would be the most logical voice leading, he goes to the C flat, so he goes up. The only way that it ever made sense was when a composer told me that that's a very standard orchestral move. In other words, what's happening orchestrally, the clarinet is cued and comes in, so a completely different instrument takes over. So I think it's a wonderful moment here, if I back up just a bit. Now, I mentioned about this F natural, right? So let's start to see what the F natural is doing. So here's the first pass of what happens with the F natural. The F natural brings us to a C flat minor chord. So we have another substitution chord. German augmented sixth chord, which resolves to the 164 chord in G flat major. We retonicize G flat major. Now, here's where the good stuff comes. Back again to the F flat. Common tone modulations. He's now in what we would now call B minor. Gives him the opportunity to go to D7 chord, resolving which would we expect a G major chord. He does a substitution and he uses G minor. He uses major and minor almost as if it had no consequence. We go to G minor, German augmented, 1-6-4, the 5 chord, and then you have G flat again. Now, what's so astounding about this is A, he accomplishes going from one side of the circle of fifths, the flat side of the circle of fifths, to the completely opposite side of the circle of fifths. So it's astounding harmonic move. The other issue that's so very interesting is, and we don't know because we don't know how composers always compose, we don't know necessarily if he was in a cafe one night and thought that this progression came to him and somehow whatever. But do you see that in order to do this harmonically, you would have to have a melody that was not moving around so much, because what's so daring and destabilized, so to speak, is the harmonic language. So that you can see, watch what he does. I'm going to play it again to the upper voice as all of this harmonic movement's happening. I'm going to start in the second half of measure 77. So you can see that same repeated melodic note, exactly what we dealt with at the beginning of the piece. With not so daring harmonies underneath, completely changes the picture. After that kind of harmonic motion, look how long he takes to retonicize the G flat and just keeps going back to it. So you're in the measure. Let's take it from measure 80, the German 6, augmented 6 chord. Quite a long time to retonicize G flat major. So it's amazing to me in terms of proportion and activity. So I just thought that just looking at the piece from that point of view was just so very interesting to me. So in looking over this piece, we become aware of the musical challenges and the implication these challenges make for musical mastery. We have a melody with a running figure, which creates a texture underneath this flowing and singing line. The bass is mostly harmonic substance and goes to a melodic place in the B section. The musical needs of control are a must for successfully performing this work. We're going to start at the level of reality. What do I mean by that? Let us look at the upper line. Can you see that we must repeat the same melody note 3 times before changing pitch? Therefore, there is no realistic possibility for absolute legato. So let's take a look at that. If I'm playing a B flat with my 5th finger, and I have to play the B flat with my 5th finger again, it actually doesn't matter how long I hold on to that B flat. At a certain place, that key has to come up in order to come down again. Okay, now, once the key is down, there's nothing that you can do to affect the sound of that note. That's just fact. So why not take advantage of that and use what we know in terms of the Taubman work, give it a beautiful sound, but get off of it and get your arm over to the inner notes, which are so very difficult to control anyway, and not have the hand be stretched out trying to control the soft notes. So Taubman understood these needs and made a distinction between feeling physically legato and sounding legato. So the entire category of enslavement to notation came from this primary understanding. Also, we cannot simply let go without a specific and exact way to approach and successfully have the listener experience a beautiful line. Please consider that there are many, many passages where physical legato is not possible. And we as listeners identify the playing of these passages as connected and sounding like a line. How do we master these things? We have to have our hands around certain skills. Those skills are the ability to produce tone. We have to have timing, a lot of what Edna was talking about, how to time the key. We need to know how to shape. We're going to have a lecture tomorrow morning on shaping, but shaping are the up and down and across motions which form curvilinear shapes across the instrument. They unify the technique, they smooth out the technique, and they give artists the chance to create musical shape in their playing. So it's physical and it's musical. A very good example of that is if I have no physical shaping and I'm playing, we relate to playing like that very much as notey playing. Like if you heard somebody play this, we hear it as very notey. But the minute the forearm begins to move across the instrument in certain and very specific patterns, from the hand and the forearm and not from the wrist as an isolated motion, you begin to have physical shaping. Moving across this way is what we would call an undershape, but you notice that the wrist doesn't go way down. It's more of a cross. And getting a little bit higher on the way down is what we call an overshape. The minute we add that, something goes from sounding like this to sounding, and one would say one is musical and one would say one is unmusical. But it doesn't necessarily mean the person is musical or unmusical. They might just lack the ability to understand how to physically shape and apply it to music. So we have to have physical shaping. And the reality of the matter is we have pedal. So we do have pedal, and pedal can sustain sound for us. We have to have the ability to play softly. So in other words, in this passage right at the very beginning, we're dealing with producing tone on the melody note. We're dealing with how to shape into the accompanimental figure, and then how to control the soft playing. So when we train people, and we don't do this at the very beginning, but as techniques begin to function, then we can get the fingers closer to the key and put the keys down a little bit slower. And that helps us play softly. Now, it really helps if my hand is not stretched out here. So I've left the top B flat. So you can see certain skills needing to be brought into the mixture. Now, we have to realize that the melody is not attached to itself. It's not connected to itself. So the reality here is that the melody note is going into the accompaniment, and then from the accompaniment, we're going back to the melody. So what does that mean? We have to know how to go from the fifth finger to the thumb. Well, our most efficient way, you learned on Monday, was the rotation. So the rotation exists everywhere here. There's a complete system of rotation that gets very integrated and internalized in the hand, But if I don't have rotation here, I'm going to twist. So even before we can do the rotation, we have to make sure that the torso's in the right place. A lot of this piece actually lies quite to the left. So the torso actually, if you're sitting in the middle, cannot stay here in the middle. Your torso is moving slightly to the left and maybe slightly forward so that it doesn't feel off balance. And that allows for the forearm to get in the right position. So you can see when I start this piece that my forearm is not over here to start this piece. Now that's a whole context thing, because if I had a piece that went, then my forearm should be over here. But because the piece is going here next, I have to make sure that I'm in the right position. But we can't just play in positions, because then we play in an isolated way. So that's why we need rotation. I'm not going to go through the specific rotations here, but clearly the rotation is taking me into the accompaniment, and it's taking me out of the accompaniment on the last note back into the melody. So rotation into the accompaniment, rotation out of the accompaniment back to the melody. So you can see that. I'm also dealing with physical shaping. Now, I want to address this little piece to people who have had experience with shaping, because the shaping here is actually a whole kind of display of subtlety in a way. The shapes here are very particular, very subtle, and extremely small. There's very little margin for error here, because if the shaping becomes too big, it directly affects the ability to control. So when shaping becomes too big, it has a negative effect. It pulls us off the bottom of the key, and we can no longer control the key. But what the physical shaping is here is very specific. I'm making a two-note overshape from the first note to the second note. There is the tiniest and most imperceptible undershape on the next three notes. And we know when we talk about an undershape, we know that an undershape starts from level, gets slightly lower, and ends on the way up. After that, I'm beginning an overshape that goes all the way to the second time I play the thumb. So those lines that we write, those curvy lines, are not phrasing marks. Those are shaping marks, and they tell us where the beginning of one shape starts and the end of one and the end starts. Shapes share something. The end of one shape is always the beginning of the next shape, so they're interlocking. In this case, the end of that overshape is the beginning of the undershape. The end of this overshape is the beginning of the next undershape. So can you even perceive, you can see that my arm is not staying at one level. You can see that it's changing levels, very, very small levels. It's not changing radically. Even if I do a little bit more than that, it would be way too much, because this is actually, even to have you see it, it's too big for me. But let's say I did it even larger than that. We no longer have the restfulness or peacefulness of the piece, and I can't control the keys. So the sizes of things in piano technique come very much into play. I'm hopeful that it sounded like a line, so that I can say to you that I connected nothing. Okay, so there wasn't one melody note that I connected to another melody note. So it was all done with tone, with timing, with shaping, and the in and out movements. What's very interesting here is just because we're in the key of G flat major, which is predominantly on black keys, doesn't mean that we don't have in and out. For the more experienced people, I wrote the in and out in the first measure out for you. But for everyone wanting to just experience it, just as a very general kind of way and to see it in the size that it exists, the overhead camera is a very good shot for this type of thing. So you can see, if I have no in and out motions, can you see how stuck I am? Now, as I do what's on that page, this is what you'll see. I don't know how large how visual it is, but can you see it? So you can see that there's constant in and out motion. Okay, let's go to a few other details, technical details here. Can we go to measure 4? Measure 4 poses a very interesting technical situation for us, because in the last part, on the last triplet, you can see that it has an interval. Well, the interval, having to be balanced towards the thumb side and played straight down, cannot go and throw itself over to the right. So if I began on the second half of that measure, I can't make a single rotation because the single rotation sends me off balance on the interval. So what happens here, and there are people here who have had more experience with the work, this is what's called a hybrid. So what's happening, I'm not actually completely connected from the two. We consider it a hybrid from a double rotation. So that double rotation puts me on that interval in a way that I can balance that interval towards the thumb side so that I'm not off balance. Okay, let's go to something else. Let's go to the shaping in measure 3. So sometimes shapes will go over several notes. And sometimes it seems actually rather long. And this is one of those shapes that does that. And I want to explain a little bit why it does that. So I'm going to start in measure 3. Now, starting from here, I'm making one overshape from here all the way to here. Now, the reason for that is if I don't do that, first of all, it doesn't feel good, so I wouldn't do it for that reason. But the other issue is what it does to the music in this moment, which is it chops up the experience of the music here. So you can hear, if I make it one, it very much goes with the phrasing in this moment. However, if we immediately go to measure 7, you'll see these are much shorter shapes. 3 over, 2 under, 3 over. And I'll do that a little bit faster. So in this piece, there are really 3 very, very crucial and distinctive shaping patterns and issues that have to be understood and applied appropriately. I've added it here and there in the score for you, but I just wanted you to know that sometimes, as in measure 15, it will be the shorter version. And sometimes, like in measure 14, it'll be the longer version. Let's talk a little bit about the other challenges of the piece, which are that we have at certain moments trills happening in the lower part against all of the activity of the upper parts. So the issue, if we can go to measure 19, is basically, do we just free trill, and just hope for the best? So when you free trill and hope for the best, it may work out. But usually there's a moment where you realize, I only have one more note here, I have two more there, and I don't know if I'm going to make it, and then it's a real panic at the end of the measure. So Mrs. Taubman understood that very well, and she realized that it was possible to actually work these things out. And I have to say that our colleague John Bloomfield has a wonderful DVD on the streaming about polyrhythms, how to understand them, how to analyze them, how to work on them, practice them, implement them. And it's a fantastic, fantastic video to explain what I'm going to talk about just very briefly here. So I will tell you that we spent a lot of time, both Ed and myself, trying to determine how many notes are in this particular polyrhythm, okay? So of course the upper part is non-negotiable, but the lower part is negotiable. What we came up with was that there would be 4 plus 5. That's what we figured out. So I wanted to show you a little bit how you would work out the 4 against 3. So we took the first triplet and we did 4 against 3. So if you look at the first page, right where it says Schubert, right to the right of that, you'll see some just squiggly lines and dots. So very briefly, it's all about the common denominator. I took the triplet on top and I figured out where the 4 notes go underneath. And then the second triplet, I took 3 notes and I related it to how 5 notes would fit with that, including the Nachschlag at the end. Okay? So when you work it out, we work in an area of interdependence. Interdependence is how 2 hands fit together. And what happens in interdependence is you have 2 very important factors there. Things that play together and things that trigger. So when you see this model here, you'll understand that certain notes have to trigger other notes. The interesting thing about it is, after you work it out, it feels completely natural. So it's actually very difficult for me to even demonstrate it because it's so unnatural coming back at it. But I can tell you that it helps very much in feeling that you can just very fluently go through that measure. And not get confused. So all it is working that polyrhythm out. I wanted to show one more thing, which I think I do have time to show you. Okay, at the very end, I wanted to show you something. That we can never give up on what the capabilities of the torso are, because if we start in measure 82, my torso has to come a little bit to the right in order for that C flat to feel okay. But it has to begin to move back to the left in order for the G flat chord to feel okay. And then it has to begin beforehand to move over to the right in preparation of this E flat. Now, why am I making a point of this? It's like anticipating something that's going to happen. I can't wait to the moment that the E flat has to be played to move my torso. So what I'm saying is we have so much planning in this work, So if you see what I'm talking about, it would be more like this. If I stayed in one fixed position, there's a sudden movement, which does not feel very good. And then if I stay here, can you see I have no way to get to the thumb on the G flat? If my torso is here. So you could be doing many things correctly here, but the torso doesn't choreograph itself. So just knowing that I have to start here, I have to begin to move here before the C flat. I have to begin to move back before the G flat. Now, you think your job is over, but unless I move a little bit over to the right, the left hand feels very cramped. So I have to move a little bit over to the right in measure 85. And guess what? A little bit over to the left. To be here at the end. So the amount of activity in the body itself at the end during this extremely restful section is not physically that restful, actually. But it does feel very fluid because it's done so well, whereas actually if you don't move, you're actually going to feel very disconcerted and thrown off. So I hope this can frame some of the things in this piece from the musical and the technical point of view. And thank you so much for listening.